Before we begin, let me ask you something. What would you do if your own parents sold your trauma for a business deal? My name is Avery Bennett, and I'm 31 years old. Last Thanksgiving, my parents publicly disowned me in front of 30 relatives and my sister's wealthy future in-laws. They announced I was banned from all family events because I got pregnant at 18, a shameful stain on their perfect reputation. What they carefully omitted was that their business partner had assaulted me, that they knew about it, and that they'd accepted $200,000 to make it all disappear. For 13 years, I carried their shame while they carried his money. I was erased from family photos, excluded from holidays, and painted as the daughter who chose career over family. But when they decided to sacrifice me one final time to secure my sister's engagement to the prestigious Whitaker family, they didn't know their discarded daughter had spent over a decade documenting everything. Before I share how their public execution became their own downfall, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly speaks to you. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Sometimes the family scapegoat holds the most dangerous truths. We were the Bennetts, the family everyone envied at church. My father, William, built his commercial real estate empire from nothing, or so he told everyone at country club dinners. My mother, Susan, ran 3 charity boards and organized the annual hospital gala that raised millions. Every Christmas card featured our perfect smiles in coordinating outfits, standing in front of our colonial house with its manicured lawn. I was the golden child once. Straight A's, violin recitals, accepted early to Vanderbilt. Chloe was just 14 then, still braces and braids, innocent, looking up to me like I hung the moon. Our dining room hosted dinner parties where Dad's business partners complimented Mom's cooking and praised their wonderful daughters. Mr. Donovan from Donovan Enterprises was a frequent guest, always bringing expensive wine and sitting a little too close to me at dinner. "Your daughter's growing into quite the young woman," he'd tell my parents, while his hand found my knee under the table. I was 18. Dad would beam with pride. Mom would suggest I show Mr. Donovan my acceptance letter, my awards, anything to keep him impressed and investing. The Bennett family portrait that hung above our fireplace showed 4 people who had everything. By the time I turned 18, that portrait would become the most expensive lie my parents ever bought. They kept it hanging for 13 years, even after they erased me from every other family photo. I suppose it's easier to pretend someone never existed than to admit why they had to disappear. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. The way Dad never questioned Donovan's interest in his teenage daughter. The way Mom always seated us together. They were grooming me for something, though I don't think even they understood what, until it was too late. The test showed 2 lines on a rainy Thursday in March. I sat on my dorm bathroom floor, holding 3 more tests, all positive. My hands shook as I called home. Mom answered on the second ring, her voice bright until she heard me crying. "Something happened with Mr. Donovan," I managed to say. The silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Then Dad got on the line. His voice was controlled, businesslike, the same tone he used for hostile takeover negotiations. "Come home immediately. Tell no one." The drive took 3 hours. I don't remember most of it. When I walked through our front door, my parents were sitting in the living room like they were waiting for a business meeting. No hugs, no questions about whether I was okay. Dad's first words were, "How much does Donovan know?" The next morning, I was in a private clinic 2 states away. Dad paid cash. Mom held my hand but wouldn't look at my face. On the drive home, she finally spoke. "This never happened. You were never pregnant. Donovan was never inappropriate. We're handling this as a family." A week later, a check for $200,000 was deposited into an education trust in my name, accessible only after age 30. Dad called it a consultation fee from Donovan Enterprises. I called it blood money. The moment I signed those papers, I became the family shame, the daughter who got herself in trouble and nearly cost them everything. They moved me off campus into a studio apartment, told everyone I needed space to focus on my studies. The truth was, they needed me far enough away that Donovan wouldn't get nervous, but close enough to control. I built my life without them, quietly, professionally, successfully. Graduated summa cum laude while living in exile. Got my MBA at night while working days at an investment firm. By 25, I was managing portfolios worth millions. My clients trusted me with their futures, even as my own family couldn't trust me with their present. Holiday photos arrived each year like clockwork. Mom, Dad, and Chloe in matching sweaters, 3 stockings on the mantle, 3 place settings at Thanksgiving. When relatives asked about me, Mom perfected her concerned smile. Avery's so focused on her career. You know how ambitious young women are these days. Chloe grew up believing I'd abandon them for money and success. She'd text occasionally, tentative messages like, "Mom says you're too busy for family dinners," or, "Dad mentioned you couldn't make it to my graduation." I wanted to tell her the truth so many times, but what would I say? That our father sold my silence for a business deal? That our mother chose reputation over rape? The worst part was watching Chloe become their perfect replacement daughter. Debutante ball at 18, engagement to Nathan Whitaker at 26. Everything tracked perfectly to maintain the Bennett family image. She never questioned why her older sister lived 10 miles away, but might as well have been on Mars. Dr. Harper, my therapist, called it emotional homelessness. Every week for 13 years, we worked through the trauma, the gaslighting, the grief of losing a family that was never really mine. She kept meticulous records, professional assessments that would one day matter more than I could have imagined. "Document everything," she always said. "Truth has a way of demanding its day." The Whitaker family announcement made the society pages in August. Whitaker heir to wed Bennett beauty. The photo showed Chloe's radiant smile, Nathan's protective arm around her, and our parents beaming in the background. The article mentioned their close-knit family and impeccable reputation. It didn't mention their other daughter. The Whitakers were everything my parents aspired to be. Old money that went back 3 generations. Board positions at Fortune 500 companies. The kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. Nathan's mother, Elizabeth Whitaker, served on the Mets board and summered in the Hamptons. His father owned the largest private equity firm in the state. My phone rang the night after the announcement. Dad's number. I almost didn't answer. "Avery." "Not hello. Not how are you." "The Whitakers are conducting background checks, very thorough ones. We need to discuss your situation." By situation, he meant my existence. By discuss, he meant strategize my erasure. "What do you want?" I asked. Cooperation, distance, discretion. Each word dropped like a stone. "The wedding is next spring. Until then and after, you need to be invisible. Chloe's happiness depends on it." I thought about Chloe, 27 and in love, building her life on a foundation of lies she didn't even know existed. "And if I don't? Then you're not the smart woman I raised you to be." The threat was subtle but clear. They still had connections, influence, the ability to make my professional life difficult. But what Dad didn't know was that I'd been seeing Dr. Harper twice a week, keeping every receipt, every document, every piece of evidence. The education trust would be accessible in 3 months. I could wait. I'd been waiting 13 years. The invitation came 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. Formal cardstock with Mom's perfect calligraphy. "Please join us for Thanksgiving dinner. The Whitakers will be attending. Your presence is requested at 4 p.m. sharp." Your presence is requested. Like I was a business associate, not their daughter. I called Dr. Harper immediately. "They want something," she said. "This isn't reconciliation. Prepare yourself. I spent the next 2 weeks gathering documents, medical records from the clinic, the deposit slip from Donovan's payoff, Dr. Harper's 13 years of session notes professionally summarized. My lawyer, recommended by Dr. Harper, prepared everything in a neat folder. Just in case, he said. The morning of Thanksgiving, I dressed carefully. Conservative dress, minimal makeup, the pearl necklace they'd given me for my 18th birthday, back when I was still their daughter. I placed the folder in my purse along with a sealed envelope I'd prepared specially for the occasion. The drive to my childhood home felt like traveling back in time. Each familiar street corner held a memory of the girl I used to be before that rainy Thursday changed everything. I parked behind a line of luxury cars. The Whitakers drove matching Mercedes. Of course they did. Standing at the front door, I could hear laughter inside, 30 voices at least. Mom had pulled out all the stops. I rang the doorbell. Imagine ringing the doorbell at your own parents' house. And waited. Chloe answered, her engagement ring catching the light. Avery, oh my God, you actually came. Her hug was genuine but confused. Behind her, I could see the dining room filled with relatives I hadn't seen in years, and at the head of the table, the Whitaker family holding court. I knew something was wrong the moment I walked in. The seating arrangement told me everything. One chair placed at the far end of the table, separated from everyone else by empty space, stage positioning. Mom had even adjusted the lighting so that spot would be perfectly illuminated. This wasn't a reconciliation. It was an execution. Aunt Margaret whispered to Uncle David when she saw me. Cousins I'd grown up with avoided eye contact. The Whitaker family studied me like anthropologists observing a curious specimen. Only Grandma Evelyn, 82 and sharp as ever, gave me a warm smile from across the room. Avery, so glad you could join us, Mom announced, her voice carrying over the conversations. Everyone, you remember our eldest daughter? The way she said eldest made it sound like a disease. As I took my isolated seat, I heard Mrs. Whitaker murmur to her husband. Susan warned me about the situation. So brave of them to attempt inclusion. Attempt inclusion, like I was a charity case at my own family's table. Dad clinked his glass. Before we begin, I want to thank everyone for joining us, especially the Whitakers, who will officially become family this spring. He paused, his eyes finding mine. Family is about choices, about choosing who deserves to be at your table. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Harper. Remember, you're not that 18-year-old girl anymore. You have power now. She was right. I did have power. In my purse, in my truth, in my silence that was about to end. I smiled at Dad, the same practiced smile I'd learned from watching him close deals. He had no idea he'd just walked into his own trap. Mom began passing dishes, performing her perfect hostess routine. The Whitakers were seated in positions of honor, close to my parents, and there I sat. The family shame, exactly where they wanted me. We were halfway through dinner when Mom stood up, tapping her wine glass. The room quieted immediately. She wore her charity gala smile, the one that had raised millions for causes she couldn't actually name. I wanted to address something before we continue, she began, her voice steady and rehearsed. As we celebrate Chloe's upcoming marriage to this wonderful family, it's important to be transparent. Transparent? The word hit me like cold water. Our eldest daughter, Avery, has been distant from the family for many years. She looked directly at me. Since she got pregnant at 18. Forks stopped moving. The silence was absolute. We've carried this shame long enough, Mom continued. It's only fair that the Whitakers know what they're truly joining. Avery made choices that nearly destroyed our family's reputation. We've protected her from consequences for 13 years, but with a wedding approaching, honesty matters. Mrs. Whitaker's eyes widened slightly. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. Chloe's face had gone pale. Susan, Grandma Evelyn said quietly, "This isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," Dad interrupted, standing beside Mom. "The Whitakers deserve to know why Avery won't be at the wedding, why she's not in family photos, why we've had to distance ourselves." He turned to me, his expression cold. "Avery is banned from all family events going forward. We cannot have our mistakes." He paused, letting the words sink in, contaminating Chloe's fresh start. 30 people stared at me, some with pity, some with disgust, most with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for car accidents. Chloe's eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. Nathan's mother leaned over to whisper something to her husband. I set down my fork carefully, deliberately. The small clink it made against the china seemed to echo in the silence. Dad wasn't finished. He never was when he smelled blood in the water. "To be clear," he said, his CEO voice filling the room, "Avery is no longer welcome at any Bennett family gathering. Not Christmas, not Easter, and certainly not Chloe's wedding." He looked at the Whitakers. "We apologize for any discomfort this causes. We should have been more forthcoming about our family challenges." Family challenges. 13 years of trauma reduced to a corporate euphemism. "William," Uncle David started, "don't you think?" "I think the Whitakers deserve a family without scandal." Dad cut him off. "Chloe deserves a wedding without shadows." Chloe finally spoke, her voice small. "Dad, please." "It's for your own good, sweetheart." Mom's voice was soothing, maternal. The good mother protecting her good daughter from the bad one. Mrs. Whitaker cleared her throat. "We appreciate your transparency. The Whitaker family values honesty above all else." The irony was so thick I could taste it. Honesty from the parents who buried a crime under $200,000 of hush money. I stood slowly, my movements deliberate and calm. Every eye tracked me as I picked up my purse. I could feel Dad's satisfaction radiating across the table. He thought he'd won, thought he'd finally erased me completely, publicly, with witnesses who mattered. "Thank you," I said, my voice carrying clearly. "Thank you for finally being honest about how you feel." Mom actually smiled, mistaking my composure for defeat. I reached into my purse, my fingers finding the envelope I'd prepared. 13 years of therapy had led to this moment. 13 years of Dr. Harper saying, "When you're ready, you'll know." I had waited 13 years for this moment. I stood there for a moment, letting the weight of their cruelty settle over the room like fog. My phone buzzed again, Dr. Harper checking in. The small vibration grounded me, reminded me that I had support beyond these walls. "Before I go," I said, my voice steady as still water, "I want to thank you both for clarifying things so publicly. It takes courage to announce your character to 30 witnesses." Dad's jaw tightened. He recognized the tone. I'd learned it from him. The calm before a deal closes, the quiet that precedes a killing stroke in negotiations. "Avery, just leave," Mom said, but her voice wavered. Something in my posture, my absolute lack of tears or pleading, had shifted the room's energy. I walked slowly around the table, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor, each step measured, purposeful. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't running. For the first time in 13 years, I was exactly where I needed to be. "Chloe," I said, stopping beside my sister. "I'm sorry you had to learn about our family this way. You deserved better." She looked up at me, confusion and pain mixing in her eyes. "Avery, what are you—" "You'll understand soon." I squeezed her shoulder gently, then continued my path toward the Whitakers. Mrs. Whitaker watched me approach with the kind of alert stillness that suggested she understood power dynamics better than my parents assumed. Her husband straightened in his chair. Nathan looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. I reached into my purse, pulling out the envelope. Cream-colored, expensive paper, the kind used for important documents. Dad's sharp intake of breath told me he recognized it from his own business dealings. "Mrs. Whitaker," I said, extending the envelope to her. "If you've ever been blamed for something that wasn't entirely your fault, or if your family has ever chosen their reputation over your well-being, please hit that like button. Your support means everything, and it helps other people find stories like mine. Let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to stand up to your own family?" Now, let me tell you what happened next. Mrs. Whitaker looked at the envelope, then at me, then at my parents. She had the kind of face that had never been told no, aristocratic, refined, accustomed to deference, but she was also intelligent. I could see her calculating, assessing the situation like the chess game it had become. "Since we're sharing family histories tonight," I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I thought you should have the complete record." Dad shot up from his chair. "Avery, that's private." "Private?" I let the word hang in the air. Like my pregnancy announcement just now. Mrs. Whitaker took the envelope with manicured fingers. The paper was heavy, expensive. I'd chosen it carefully. Details matter when you're changing your life. "This is inappropriate," Mom said, her voice climbing. "Elizabeth, please. You don't need to." "Susan." Mrs. Whitaker's voice cut through Mom's panic like a blade. "You just announced your daughter's teenage pregnancy to establish transparency. Surely you won't object to reciprocal honesty." The room held its breath. Dad's hand trembled as he reached for his water glass. That tremor. I'd seen it only once before, when the FBI had investigated one of his deals. He knew what was coming. Part of him had always known this day would arrive. I returned to my place at the table, sat down, and picked up my wine glass. "I'll wait while you read. It's only fair since everyone waited while my parents shared my story." Mrs. Whitaker opened the envelope with the kind of deliberate care usually reserved for defusing bombs. In a way, that's exactly what she was doing. Inside were 3 documents, each one a piece of truth my parents had spent 13 years and $200,000 trying to bury. "That's private family business." Dad's voice cracked as he lunged toward Mrs. Whitaker. Uncle David had to physically restrain him. I'd never seen my father lose control like this. Not the man who'd built an empire on handshakes and calculated risks. "William, what is this?" Mom's perfect hostess mask finally slipped. "What did you give her?" Mrs. Whitaker was already reading, her eyes moving across the first page with the kind of focus that had made her husband billions in acquisitions. The room watched her face change. Confusion, then understanding, then something that looked like rage. "Medical records," she said quietly, "from Clearview Clinic." Mom went white. That was the place. The clinic 2 states away where they'd paid cash. "William," Mrs. Whitaker continued, her voice gaining strength, "your signature is on this payment receipt, $200,000 from Donovan Enterprises dated 1 week after the procedure." "You don't understand the context," Dad stammered. William Bennett, who never stammered, who commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals over golf, was stammering. "Donovan was helping us through a difficult time." "Donovan?" Mr. Whitaker spoke for the first time, his voice sharp. "Victor Donovan? He's been investigated 3 times for inappropriate conduct with minors." The room erupted. Aunt Margaret gasped. Uncle David released Dad's arm in shock. Chloe made a sound like she'd been punched. "The second document," Mrs. Whitaker continued, her voice cutting through the chaos, "is a psychological evaluation from Dr. Laura Harper dated last month, 13 years of treatment for trauma resulting from sexual assault." Dad's hands were shaking violently now. Mom had collapsed into her chair, her face in her hands. "There must be a mistake," Mom said. "Avery, tell them there's been a mistake." Mrs. Whitaker's perfectly manicured fingers trembled as she reached the second page. The room had gone so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the same clock that had counted the hours after I'd come home pregnant, scared, and 18. "This is a notarized statement from the nurse present at the clinic," she read aloud, describing an 18-year-old girl who showed signs of trauma consistent with assault. Grandma Evelyn made a sound like a wounded animal. "Oh, Avery. Oh, sweetheart." Mrs. Whitaker looked up at my parents, and I saw something I'd never expected from a woman of her standing: pure, undiluted disgust. "You took money," she said to my father. "You took money to silence your daughter's rape." The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Rape, not incident, not situation, not mistake. The truth finally spoken aloud in this room where we'd celebrated so many Thanksgivings, so many carefully orchestrated lies. "It wasn't," Dad started, but Mrs. Whitaker wasn't finished. "The third document is from Donovan Enterprises' internal investigation, leaked by a whistleblower. Your daughter's name is on a list of 4 young women who received similar consultation fees. The youngest was 17. Chloe vomited right there at the table onto Mom's heirloom tablecloth. Nathan rushed to help her, but she pushed him away, staring at our parents with horror. "You knew." Chloe's voice was barely a whisper. "You knew what he did to her. And you made her the villain." Mrs. Whitaker stood, the documents still in her hand. "Mr. Whitaker, we're leaving. Nathan, get your coat." "Mother," Nathan started. Her voice brooked no argument. "We do not associate with people who sell their children." "Wait," Mrs. Whitaker said, stopping at the head of the table. "Everyone here should hear this. You all participated in shaming this young woman for 13 years. She held up the final page. "This is a letter from Dr. Harper, Avery's therapist." "May I, Avery?" I nodded. "Let them hear it all." Mrs. Whitaker's clear voice filled the room. "Avery Bennett has shown remarkable resilience in the face of systematic family betrayal. At 18, she was sexually assaulted by Victor Donovan, a man her parents welcomed into their home. When she became pregnant as a result, her parents chose to protect their business relationship over their daughter's well-being. They accepted payment for her silence, forced her to terminate the pregnancy, and then ostracized her to maintain their false narrative. Aunt Margaret was crying. Uncle David looked sick. The cousins who'd avoided my eyes were staring at my parents in shock. Furthermore," Mrs. Whitaker continued, "the psychological damage of being blamed for her own assault, isolated from family support, and branded as the family shame has required extensive therapeutic intervention. Despite this, Avery has built a successful career, maintained her dignity, and never once violated the silence her parents purchased. Until tonight." She set the papers on the table in front of my father. "The fact that you chose tonight to publicly humiliate your daughter one final time in front of my family to protect your younger daughter's engagement reveals exactly who you are." Mom tried to speak. "Elizabeth, please. The wedding." "There will be no wedding." Mrs. Whitaker's voice was final. "The Whitaker family does not join with people who sell their children's safety for profit." But that wasn't even the worst part. "There's one more thing," I said, standing again. My voice was steady, clear. 13 years of therapy had prepared me for this moment. The investigation into Donovan revealed something else. Dad's face had gone gray. He knew what was coming. I wasn't the first girl from a business partner's family. The FBI found a pattern going back 10 years. Dad knew. There were complaints before me, settlements before mine. The room erupted. Chairs scraped back as people stood. Voices raised in shock and anger. But I kept going. When I came home pregnant and terrified, Dad didn't call the police. He called Donovan. They negotiated my silence like a real estate deal. $200,000 for the abortion, the therapy, and my signature on an NDA that's now void thanks to the criminal investigation. You're lying, Mom said, but her voice held no conviction. The FBI has the emails. Mom, Dad discussing my situation with Donovan, negotiating the price of my silence, planning how to spin it as my fault if anyone asked. I pulled out my phone, showed them the case number. I've been cooperating with them for 6 months. Chloe stood on shaking legs, mascara streaming down her face. You let me think she abandoned us for her career. You made me hate my own sister for being a victim. Chloe, sweetheart. Mom reached for her. Don't touch me. Chloe's voice was raw. Don't you ever touch me again. Grandma Evelyn stood, using her cane for support. At 82, she moved with the authority of a matriarch who'd seen enough. She walked to me, cupped my face in her weathered hands. I suspected, she whispered. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you. Mrs. Whitaker pulled out her phone. I'm calling our lawyer. Avery, do you have representation? Yes, I said. He's been waiting for my call. The room fractured into chaos. Aunt Margaret confronted my mother, demanding to know how she could do this to her own daughter. Uncle David was on his phone with someone, his voice urgent. The younger cousins huddled together, processing the horror of what they'd just learned, but the most important witness was yet to speak. I can confirm everything Avery just said. The voice came from the doorway. Dr. Laura Harper stood there, professional in her blazer, holding a briefcase. I apologize for arriving unannounced, but Avery asked me to be available if needed. This is a violation of privacy, Dad started. Actually, Avery signed a release allowing me to discuss her treatment in this specific context. Everything I'm about to say is legally protected testimony that I've already provided to the FBI. She walked into the room with the confidence of someone who'd testified in court before. For 13 years, I've documented Avery's trauma, her PTSD, her struggle with family betrayal. Every session, every breakthrough, every setback caused by her parents' continued emotional abuse. We never abused, Mom protested. Gaslighting is abuse. Isolation is abuse. Blaming a rape victim for her assault is abuse. Dr. Harper's voice was clinical, devastating. You didn't just fail to protect your daughter. You actively participated in her continued victimization for over a decade. The Whitakers need to know, Dr. Harper continued, looking at Nathan's parents, that Chloe shows signs of being groomed for similar exploitation. The family dynamics that allowed Avery's assault are still present. Chloe gasped. Nathan immediately moved to shield her, but she stepped away from everyone, standing alone in the center of the room. Sometimes the truth takes years to come out. But when it does, everything changes. If this story resonates with you, please consider subscribing to hear more stories about finding justice and setting boundaries. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their truth matters. And remember, you're not alone in your journey. Now, let me share what happened after that Thanksgiving. The Bennetts went from hosts to pariahs in minutes. Mrs. Whitaker was already at the door, her husband's hand on her back. Nathan, we're leaving now. But Chloe, Nathan looked torn. Is a victim too, his mother said firmly. But we cannot have our family connected to this. The liability alone? She looked at my parents with undisguised contempt. You're going to be destroyed. Criminally, civilly, socially. One by one, the relatives stood to leave. Aunt Margaret hugged me on her way out, whispering apologies. Uncle David squeezed my shoulder. The cousins who'd ignored me earlier now looked at me with a mixture of respect and horror. Avery's lying. Dad's voice cracked with desperation. She's bitter about being cut off. William. Grandma Evelyn's voice cut through his protests. I've watched you lie for 30 years, but not about this. Not anymore. She turned to me. I'm changing my will tomorrow. Everything goes to you and Chloe. Your parents are dead to me. Mom collapsed into sobs. The sound was ugly, raw, nothing like her practiced tears at charity galas. This was the sound of a woman watching her entire world crumble. Chloe stood in the ruins of the dining room, staring at the family portrait above the fireplace. Without a word, she walked over and pulled it off the wall. The crash as it hit the floor was satisfying. Final. 13 years, she said to our parents. 13 years. You let me think my sister was the family. Failure. 13 years of lies. She turned to me. I'm so sorry, Avery. I'm so sorry. The room emptied until it was just the four of us, the Bennett family, or what was left of it. I stood in the wreckage of their Thanksgiving, their perfect family dinner destroyed more thoroughly than they'd ever destroyed me. The dining room that had hosted so many performances of false perfection was finally brutally honest. You did this, Dad said, his voice hollow. You destroyed everything. No, I said, picking up my purse. You did this 13 years ago when you chose Donovan's money over my safety. I just chose to stop keeping your secret. I walked to Chloe, who stood shaking among the scattered china and shattered portrait frame. My door is open when you're ready. Dr. Harper has a colleague who specializes in family trauma. I'll send you her information. Chloe nodded, unable to speak through her tears. I turned to my parents one last time. They looked smaller, somehow diminished. The powerful William and Susan Bennett reduced to what they'd always been. Cowards who sold their daughter for social standing. The trust fund is mine in 2 weeks, I said. My lawyer will be in touch about the rest. The house, the assets you put in my name for tax purposes. I'll be collecting everything. Consider it 13 years of unpaid therapy bills. Avery, please. Mom reached out. Mom, no. I stepped back. You had 13 years of please, 13 years to apologize, to make it right, to choose me. You chose this instead. I walked to the door, my heels clicking on the hardwood with the same measured pace I'd entered with. At the threshold, I turned back one more time. I recorded everything tonight for the FBI. They're very interested in Dad's connection to Donovan's other victims. I walked out with my head high for the first time in 13 years. My lawyer had been waiting for my signal. The call I made from my car set everything in motion. File everything, I told him. The civil suit, the criminal complaint, all of it. By Monday morning, the Bennett family empire began its public collapse. The FBI raided Dad's office, seizing computers and files related to Donovan Enterprises. The local news picked up the story by Tuesday. Prominent developer linked to sexual assault cover-up ran below a photo of Dad in handcuffs. The trust fund transferred to my account on schedule, $200,000 plus 13 years of interest. But that was informativo, just the beginning. My lawyer found 17 properties Dad had put partially in my name for tax benefits, contracts he'd needed my signature on, telling me they were family formalities. Together, they were worth $3 million. He never thought you'd claim them, my lawyer explained. Classic narcissist mistake, assuming the victim will stay a victim forever. Donovan Enterprises folded within a month. Criminal investigations revealing 4 more families who'd been paid for silence. Dad's business partners fled like rats from a sinking ship. His credit lines were called in. The house went into foreclosure. Mom's charity boards expelled her within a week. The country club revoked their membership. The church they'd attended for 20 years asked them not to return. In trying to protect their reputation, they'd ensured its complete destruction. Dr. Harper submitted her 13 years of records to support my civil case. The trauma, the PTSD, the suicide attempts they never knew about. All documented, all admissible. The judge awarded me another $500,000 in damages. But the real justice wasn't monetary. It was the truth, finally free, spreading through their carefully curated world like wildfire. Within a month, the Bennett name became synonymous with scandal. The story spread through their social circles like cancer, each retelling adding another layer of horror. The business community blacklisted Dad completely. Who would trust a man who sold his daughter's safety for a deal? Mom's book club disbanded rather than have her attend. The hospital gala committee sent a formal letter requesting she never contact them again. Every charity she'd worked with publicly distanced themselves. The local newspaper ran an editorial about wolves in sheep's clothing that didn't name her directly but didn't need to. Their friends, the ones who'd attended their parties, praised their parenting, envied their success, disappeared overnight. The Mitchells, the Carlsons, the Weatherbys, all the families who'd formed their social foundation wouldn't return their calls. Mom's sister flew in from Portland just to tell her she was no longer welcome at family reunions. The house sold at foreclosure for a third of its value. They moved to a rental apartment on the wrong side of town, the kind of place Dad used to buy and flip without ever stepping inside. Mom got a job at a call center. Dad couldn't find work anywhere. His name was poison in the business community. But the cruelest blow came from their own church. Pastor Reynolds, who'd baptized both Chloe and me, who'd eaten at their table countless times, delivered a sermon about false prophets and whited sepulchres that everyone knew was about them. They tried attending service once after that. The congregation's cold silence drove them out before the opening hymn ended. They got what they deserved, Aunt Margaret told me later. But honestly, Avery, it wasn't enough. Not for what they did to you. Chloe called me 3 weeks after Thanksgiving. Her voice was different. Older, sadder, but somehow stronger. "Can we meet?" she asked. "I need to apologize properly." We met at a coffee shop in Nashville, neutral territory. She looked exhausted with dark circles under her eyes, but her posture was straighter than I'd ever seen it. "I broke up with Nathan," she said first, "not because his family demanded it, but because I realized I don't know who I am. They raised me to be a doll, Avery, a perfect, empty doll." She showed me her phone. She'd blocked our parents' numbers. "They keep trying to contact me through other people. Mom sent 17 emails about how you've destroyed the family. Dad actually asked if I could lend them money." "Chloe, she interrupted. "I started therapy with Dr. Harper's colleague. She says I show signs of emotional abuse, parentification, and grooming behaviors. I never knew that's what it was. I thought being the good daughter meant something." She pulled out an envelope, hands shaking. "I hired a lawyer. I'm suing them too. For emotional abuse, for the trust fund they stole from my college account to pay for their lifestyle, for making me complicit in your abuse without my knowledge." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." Her voice was firm. "For 13 years, I was their weapon against you. Every family photo without you, every holiday you missed, every time I parroted their lies about your selfishness, I was hurting you. I didn't know, but that doesn't make it okay." She reached across the table, taking my hand. "I want my sister back, if you'll have me. I know I don't deserve it, but—" "You were a child," I said. "They manipulated you too." Chloe finally saw the prison our parents had built for both of us. The family I lost was replaced by the family I found. Grandma Evelyn became a regular at my apartment, bringing cookies and 13 years of suppressed affection. She'd suspected something all along but had been threatened into silence. "Your father told me I was having dementia episodes," she admitted. "Said I was imagining things about Donovan. Made me doubt my own mind. I should have fought harder for you." Aunt Margaret reached out next, then Uncle David, then cousins I hadn't spoken to since I was 18. Each one carrying their own guilt, their own piece of the puzzle they'd been too afraid to examine. We formed a different kind of family, one built on truth instead of image. The most unexpected connection came from other survivors. After the news broke, 3 women contacted me. All had similar stories about Donovan. All had been silenced by their families. We formed a support group, meeting monthly at Dr. Harper's office. Their strength helped me realize I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was healing. Chloe moved in with me while she found her footing. We spent evenings cooking together, watching movies, having the sister conversations we'd been denied for 13 years. She was in intensive therapy, unpacking years of manipulation. "They trained me to be you," she said one night. "The improved version, the one who wouldn't get in trouble. But the whole time they were just teaching me to be a better victim." Even Mrs. Whitaker reached out 6 months later, not to reconcile with Chloe, that bridge was burned, but to apologize and offer a reference for my business. "You showed more courage in one evening than most people manage in a lifetime," her letter said. "The corporate world needs women like you." I found my real family among those who believed me. 6 months after that Thanksgiving, I stood in my new office, CEO of my own investment firm. The lawsuit settlements and recovered assets had given me the capital to break free from working for others. My clients followed me, trusting the woman who'd had the courage to speak truth to power. Chloe was back in school, studying psychology with a focus on family trauma. She'd moved into her own apartment, but we had dinner every Sunday. She was dating someone new, a social worker who understood trauma and treated her with the respect she was still learning she deserved. Our parents had disappeared into obscurity. Last I heard, they'd moved to a different state, living under Mom's maiden name. Dad was working construction. Mom was stocking shelves at a grocery store. They'd sent one letter through their lawyer asking for forgiveness and financial help. My lawyer's response was 2 words: no contact. Dr. Harper and I had reduced our sessions to once a month. Maintenance, she called it, though we both knew it was more like victory laps. 13 years of intensive therapy had led to this, not just survival, but triumph. The Donovan investigation had expanded to 3 states. 17 families had come forward. Dad was facing federal charges for money laundering and conspiracy. The FBI agent handling my case told me my testimony had been crucial. "You broke the dam," she said. "Your courage gave others permission to speak." I'd started speaking at survivor conferences, sharing my story with rooms full of people who understood. The girl who'd been silenced at 18 had found her voice at 31, and it turned out that voice could help others find theirs too. I chose peace over family, and I've never been happier. Your truth matters, even if your family denies it. For 13 years, I believed their version of my story: the shameful daughter who got herself in trouble, the selfish sister who chose career over family, the stain on their perfect reputation. But truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep you try to bury it. Setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's necessary. Going no contact with your parents doesn't make you a bad daughter. Refusing to keep family secrets doesn't make you disloyal. Choosing your mental health over family harmony makes you brave, not selfish. Some people will say, "I should have forgiven them. That family is everything. That holding on to anger only hurts you." But here's what I learned: forgiveness isn't required for healing. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and for them, is to walk away and stay away. My parents lost everything because they valued their reputation over their daughter's safety. They spent 13 years building a house of cards, and I didn't knock it down. I just stopped protecting it from the wind. If you're sitting at someone's table right now, feeling like the family shame, wondering if your truth matters, it does. If you're keeping a secret that's eating you alive to protect people who wouldn't protect you, you don't have to. If you're being blamed for something that wasn't your fault, that shame isn't yours to carry. Your story matters. Your pain is valid. Your truth deserves to be heard. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply refusing to be silenced anymore. It's choosing yourself, even if that means standing alone at first. Because eventually you'll find your real family, the people who believe you, support you, and love you without conditions. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've survived family trauma or had to set difficult boundaries, you're not alone. Please like and subscribe if this resonated with you. Share your own boundary-setting victories in the comments. Your story might help someone else find their courage. What boundaries have you had to set with family? Remember, choosing yourself isn't selfish,